Of all permission. So let's see.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Asim. Okay. Okay, so hopefully you can see my PowerPoint slide, which shows okay, I'll pick up where we were. So as I was mentioning, my master's work is in information systems management, and I teach a class, Intro to Information Systems Management, to about 130 students every semester. And so I've wrestled with the same challenges that many of you as faculty are facing. I actually used to do an essay assignment in my class, and over last December 2022, the holidays, went through the process of changing the entire assignment into a different process that uses a podcast. That's a little bit outside of the scope of today's conversation. I think with today, I want to focus a little bit more on just how we're supporting faculty and what are the resources that are available, and how a model for Tuskegee perhaps as well. So again, just my background's in information technology. For the last 10 years, I've been working with online learning in general. I founded Auburn Online, and then since January of 2020, timed it really well with the pandemic, but I became executive director of what we call the Bigio Center at Auburn. That's the central unit in our provost office that supports all teaching and learning campus-wide, includes online, includes our testing center, our instructional technology support, professional development for faculty, as well as overseeing our centrally managed classroom buildings. So I do want to highlight my link to Tuskegee. We moved to Alabama. I moved to Alabama, and I'm a resident of Alabama today because some of you may know my father, Dr. Syed Farasat Ali, was a faculty member at Tuskegee in aerospace engineering for 30 years prior to his retirement a couple of years ago, and just hope to live up to the remarkable legacy of kindness and just professionalism that he has left behind. So I did attend Tuskegee in fourth grade when we first moved to Alabama, and have often visited the campus and spent many a time in 327 Chappie James Hall, which was his office. So again, thank you for the opportunity to connect with my Tuskegee colleagues and friends, and it means a lot to me to be able to do that. So I'd like for you to use the chat if it's still possible. I think chat is available for users. I'd like for you to share a few words that initially come to mind when you think of artificial intelligence, just your raw emotional reaction to the phrase. So we see words like predictive, computer run world, convenient. Let me see if I'll give a chance to a couple of other folks to chime in with their thoughts as well. Let me see if I can. So automation, alternative. So, what's interesting is when I asked this question several months ago, the kinds of words that I would hear would be, fearful and, kind of not sure about where the world is headed. Some of that may still be true, but I think what's helpful is people are taking the step in terms of becoming familiar with the concept. So hopefully that's reducing the fear a little bit and turning that into a more constructive and still cautious thoughts around what could happen. We think about artificial intelligence, you're probably using it every day. When you check the weather, most of the predictive analysis that gives us the weather today is based on historical records that have been fed into models that enable the prediction of what's going to happen today or 10 days from now and those kinds of things. So if you use Siri, or even if you use OK Google and Hey Alexa, any of those are driven largely with being able to explain what you're saying, being able to interpret what you're saying, auto completing your emails. GPS, the joke with GPS used to be, it used to tell you that it was going to take 15 minutes to get somewhere, and then all of a sudden it would be 55 minutes, and then it'd be back down to 10 minutes back in the early days of GPS. But now when you're driving, it'll say things like, hey, there's a 15-minute slowdown ahead, but you're still on the fastest route. Those kinds of interpretations are based on just years and years of data that have fed into these models that tell us these things. So you're using artificial intelligence in many hidden ways already. So, if we think about when we see something like ChatGPT specifically write out, for example, what Dr. Prakash demonstrated in his prompt, it's easy to be wowed by that. But the reality is that's the definition of AI, is to mimic human intelligence. And so if something has been designed and programmed to do that, it is still remarkable as a human achievement that we've developed something that allows it to do that. But when you first built stairs and went up the stairs, that's very exciting, but that's what stairs are designed to do, right? And so these generative platforms are designed to create and predict the next word, so to speak, right? It's the result of decades and decades of research. This is basically building upon stuff that we've already been doing. The two key things really are the hardware in terms of the computing power has really caught up with what our ambitions are on this stuff. I had Dr. Adi's husband at Auburn for computer science classes, and back then we used to talk about artificial intelligence as many of the things that we see today as a theoretical concept. But now that the hardware capabilities have caught up with many of the things that we're trying to do, and that's why we see the performance of NVIDIA as a company, as one of the major providers of the hardware, being so good. And also the second part is this idea of human knowledge just being searchable, right? We can not just Wikipedia, not just website and internet, but so many things that we can search and find the answers to, whether it's through Google, but also through many other resources that we may have on our campuses, even simply searching through documents and things like that. But all of human knowledge, it's fair to say, is fairly searchable now. And that has allowed basically models to be trained to learn from that information. So those are the two key things over the last several years that have led to kind of the uptick in the news and hype that we're seeing from things like ChatGPT. So it's also interesting to compare computer programming used to be and still largely is this idea of needing to build explicit code. If something is this way, then do this, right? So if I wanted to write a computer program to help me figure out if a picture is a car or not, then I would say, well, if it has 4 doors and 4 wheels, then it's a car. And then I would show it a picture of maybe a sedan, and it would say, yep, this is a car. And maybe I would show it a picture of a convertible coupe, and then all of a sudden it would say, nope, this is not a car. And then I would go in and explicitly say, if it has 2 doors, or if it has a convertible cloth roof also, it could be a car. It can get very complicated, and that's why sometimes we see those errors in those traditional computer programs. But the AI leverages the computer's ability to learn, and that's what we call machine learning. We can give it, say, 10,000 pictures of cars and 5,000 pictures of things we kind of look like cars but aren't, and then say, hey, is this 15,001st picture I'm showing you, is that a car? And based on what we've trained the system to do, it's able to tell us. And it's used in very practical ways. There's some predictions that about 80% of the emails that actually hit the average email server are spam. Most of those do not make it into your inbox because of the filters that are set up on those servers. There's 1 billion credit card transactions every day. It's not humanly possible to identify which ones are fraudulent. So AI models have been used to be able to tell if the next credit card transaction that you're engaged in is fraudulent or not. And then, you may be using autocomplete on your emails that you're writing. So it's really a statistician's, just incredible experience, because this is, when we were sitting in our stats classes in undergrad, right? And they're like, yeah, one day you'll need to really use this. Yeah, this is the day, because that's what these models are really built on, is being able to predict what's the next letter, what's the next word, and what's the next paragraph. And it's also important to understand the difference that everything that we have today is artificial narrow intelligence. And what that means is, it's useful for specific functions. Those of you that may have seen, for example, how a Tesla drives, it's got a screen that shows you that what it's seeing, what it's interpreting around on the cameras. It'll say something like, oh, this is a construction cone. This is a human being on the street. It doesn't know if that human being is a construction employee waving you through, or if it's a child who's going to run in front of the car. It just knows there's a human. I should slow down or stop, right? And all of those things, as remarkable as they seem, are still what we call artificial narrow intelligence. In other words, they're useful for specific functions. The when you typically see AI in movies, some of you guys may have seen the latest Mission Impossible movie, but even if you look at some of the older movies like iRobot and those kinds of things, they usually are creating those doom scenarios. In all of those, the AI has come to life, right? It has sentience, and that would be considered artificial general intelligence. And most of the experts think that we're still decades away from anything remotely close to that. So computers are not sentient, and that can give us some ability to relax. Well, we can't relax too much, right? Because, we have to ask ourselves the question, can we graduate students today from Tuskegee and not have them learn about AI and still be ready for the world that awaits them? In other words, can you keep teaching your classes the same way because AI doesn't impact your class? And I think specifically because of generative AI, the answer to both of those questions has to be no. And so if we look at generative artificial intelligence, it's built on this idea of being able for computers to understand language, or natural language processing, as it's called, right? And you may be familiar with brands like ChatGPT, or Google has developed something called Bard. There's one called Claude that's been developed by Anthropic. You saw the demonstration for ChatGPT, and these are basically saying, can I predict entire paragraphs of writing? But that's what they are. They're predictive models that are writing. So what we've done at Auburn is we recognize that there are positive uses of AI, right? And there's also challenges for AI. We want our faculty to know what it takes to be ready for their assignments in terms of if they're using writing assignments in their classes. But we also want those realities of, can we help speed up grading and things like that? So what we did was we developed a fully online self-paced course. What we noticed, again, as I was redesigning my assignment, at the Big EO Center, we had a conversation with with my leadership, and I said, we're not the only faculty that are having to experience this. We saw a lot of our peer institutions were doing conversations like this, webinars with all of their challenges as we experienced. But then we also have, people that were doing guest lectures or workshops. And the challenge of those is you have to be at a certain place at a certain time in order for those to be effective. And for the last 10 years, we've been talking about online programs and how they help us reach those professionals that are working and taking care of their families and still need to find time to upskill. And I noticed that, Tuskegee's launched online programs to reach those audiences as well. And when it comes to AI, our faculty are those people, right? We are the ones who are working all the time and taking care of our families and have all the other responsibilities. And oh, by the way, we also have to be ready for this coming challenge with artificial intelligence. So we've built a fully online self-paced course that allows faculty to elevate, to engage with content. And I'll share a little bit more details about it. But essentially, it's helping us elevate the conversation about AI in education. So folks who are not familiar with the concepts are learning the terminology, but then people who are very familiar with the concepts are also learning about how it engages with sound teaching practices. So we're able to develop skills in designing assignments and courses in this age of AI. And then also, because it's designed by our Auburn Online instructional design and creative design team, it's allowing our faculty to go through a very high quality, engaging online course. We've got 8 different modules through it. So we walk through faculty in a very high touch environment around ethical considerations, how we surveyed our students, had over 500 of them respond to how they're using AI already. Instead of seeing students as somebody who is going to take advantage of us because of AI, we encourage faculty to explore ways to partner with students and have conversations with them about the appropriate use of AI versus where it may not be appropriate to use. What I've done for this semester in my class, for example, is every assignment has AI guidance associated with it. So I'll say things like, hey, it may make sense to use AI on this, and it may make sense not to use AI in this reflection exercise, for example, and then have them think through the course design, as well as empowering faculty to have those conversations with their disciplines. So there's some more details. I can share these slides in terms of how the course is set up, but in the interest of time, I'll continue. And then folks who are completing the course are in a digital badge. So at Auburn, we have about 600 faculty and graduate students who have engaged in the course already. the Southeastern Conference, the 14 universities, they licensed the course from us, and now it's available for all 14 of those campuses. We also have about almost, I want to say 10 other universities throughout the country, as well as a couple international almost, that are also licensing this course available for their faculty. So we're seeing a lot of good use, and then it's creating that community because people who are in the course are having discussions and communicating with other peers, faculty from other campuses to talk about what those implications are for themselves. So my next steps and my recommendation for you is, try a tool with a task that's relevant for you, engage with it and see how it does. How you experience it today will be the worst it'll ever be. If you ask the same question about welcoming, people to a webinar a year from now, you'll see a very different type of a response in terms of the content may be different, certainly, but how it develops that response will be different. And so if you start giving it more challenging tasks, those will also change. I encourage you to reflect on that and really think about what are the impacts for your colleagues and for your, for your discipline, and how do you need to get your students ready for that. And I really encourage you to reward the behavior that you want to see, right? What that means is talk with your students about how AI impacts them. Why is it going to harm them if they use it for everything, and where it can be beneficial to them in terms of being ready for their careers. Talk with your colleagues. This is where we're going to learn what are those boundaries that we're willing to set, and where are we willing to test the boundaries a little bit. And then you're going to get a lot of emails from people trying to sell you the next best thing that's going to solve all problems. There's very real stuff out there. We use Gradescope at Auburn. We do a common final for all of our physics and chemistry and math students. So Calculus 1 final that's taken by over 1,000 students used to take days to grade. Now, because of something like Gradescope, which uses AI to, kind of say, well, you graded this one question. I see out of these 1,000 responses that these 300 also answered it the same way. Do you want me to grade it the same way there? It saved our faculty from having to take days to grade the final exam into just a few hours. So there are very real things out there that are improving efficiency. But then there's a lot of stuff out there that's just trying to sell you the latest, greatest thing. They call it AI. So it's fair to also be very, scrutinizing of the technology that you're seeing. Cautious about what you're sharing, certainly on those platforms. But I'll put a pause on that there. Certainly my contact information is there if you wish to engage further. And then I'm eager to see how the conversation continues with our panelists as well.
Very good. Asim, thank you so much. I really, truly appreciate your presentation. And as you saw, that Dr. Ali has developed an excellent course, a full course on Canvas that gives you a very, very descriptive, immersive experience on the use of AI in the classroom, with a lot of tools and addressing a lot of questions, including the issue of ethics and plagiarism. So what we have done is with Dr. Asim Ali has very gracefully allowed us to buy a license for about 100 faculty at a very reduced rate for this. So we're going to prepay those tuition rate and the fee for accessing those. And I'm going to let 100 of our Tuskegee University faculty, not just from my College of Arts and Science, but anybody from Tuskegee University, would be able to take that course online on Canvas and get a digital badge that you can proudly put that on your resume. Okay. So we also, talking about the good and bad of technology, how that could be misused by evildoers. We saw a little example of that already, did we not, at the beginning of this thing? And so that is an excellent metaphor for what people can do with AI. So now we move on into the panel discussion. We have assembled an extremely good panel of top experts who have sufficient insights into this area. And I'm going to start with Dr. Chadia Aji, who is a professor of mathematics and someone who I depend on for any technology issues. So Dr. Aji, can you please speak for about 5 minutes?
Sure.
Your thoughts?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Prakash, for the introduction. And I would like to extend my gratitude to Dr. Ali for the enlightening presentation. it is crucial that we understand AI, its capabilities and its limitations. Nowadays, students are adept with the technology, and many of them are already using AI. However, we should guide them on its effective use. We should not ban AI. We should teach our students to employ it effectively as a resource for understanding, brainstorming, and generating ideas. It can be used as a Google search engine. Also, students need to recognize that AI makes a lot of predictions, and they should not rely on it to do their homework for them. They must verify the information and refrain from copy pasting. So as AI should not be seen as a tool for cheating or a solution for exams or assignments. So as educators, we should provide expectations on how our students can use AI, and students are really uncertain about the ethical use or ethical boundaries, and as educators, we must provide the proper usage. So we should establish, for example, clear rules and guidelines for how it can be used. For example, students might be prohibited for using AI on tests or certain assignments, like Dr. Ali was saying. They may also be required to cite all resources that, whenever they use them, AI sources whenever they use them. We also, as educators, must know how to integrate it into a classroom. And this course from Dr. Ali will be really helpful. And I think even having a more professional development workshop to develop these skills, which are needed to integrate AI effectively in our teaching and learning, so that AI can be used to help our students learn and engage in, rather than a tool for cheating. So as a math faculty, I would like to integrate CalMigo in my teaching and learning. And Dr. Prakash introduced me to CalMigo, and I watched an amazing YouTube by Sal Khan, and which I will share on the chat, which is, this platform using AI, and which is mainly for education. It is for education, not like ChatGPT for a conversational or any general conversation. Actually, you can Migo, Sal explained and give demonstration in his video, YouTube video, saying that CalMigo can serve as interactive tutoring tool for students, and so they guide them. CalMigo guides them to get the solution rather than just providing them the answer. Also, CalMigo can be used by teachers, educators, as an assistant, or to prepare, for example, their lesson plans. Well, I'm really, I would like to know a lot about AI, how to use it. And in conclusion, we should think positively about AI, and know, of course, its limitations and potential harm also. But if we learn exactly how to use it, and thinking about it positively, and use it as a tool to engage our students and improve learning outcomes and prepare them, especially for this real world.
Okay.
Thank
Dr. Aji, thank you so much. I really appreciate your sharing your thoughts on this. The way I gather from you is, as professors, we must learn how to use it so that if we understand the intricacies of this tool, like ChatGPT, we can make sure we use it productively in the class and also help guide our students to use that as a tool of learning rather than fear that. Thank you very much for those very positive words. And now let's go to our ethics and philosopher on board, Dr. Brett Coppenger. What are your thoughts, sir, on ChatGPT?
Well, hello, everybody. And I'd just like to start by thanking Dean Prakash for the invitation to speak. And I do think this is one of those issues that's pressing and it's demanding of attention. So I like just the possibility to be addressing something like this in this kind of forum. I am Dr. Brett Coppenger. I'm an associate professor of philosophy here at Tuskegee University. And I just have some different thoughts in terms of thinking about the ethics and the use of ChatGPT on college campuses. And really, I'm coming from this from two different perspectives. So first, personally, professionally, I'm interested in the technology because of my areas of specialization. So logic, philosophy of science, epistemology, you can see that there's going to be broad issues of overlap in terms of what I do as a philosopher and what a technology like this has to say about my field. And then also, I'm interested in the appropriate use of the technology given my role as an educator, right? So I'm not just a research professor, I'm also a teaching professor. So when it comes to teaching, what should I be doing? And this goes back to Dr. Ali's point, what should I be doing to help equip my students for life in an AI world? And then also, what do I need to do as an educator to adjust the way that I teach, given that we now live in a world with this kind of AI technology? And so with that as a kind of background, and for those of you that have heard me speak on these issues before, I like to use some contrasting analogies. So I think one thing that's really helpful for us is if we can actually try and get on the same page and understand these competing perspectives that people have when they think of something like ChatGPT. So the first kind of analogy, the first way of thinking about the technology is to really just think about using it as the same way we use calculators. And now when we think about the technology in this kind of manner, you can see that there are certain things that the analogy seems to get right. The technology definitely serves a useful function, just like a calculator serves a very useful function. And the technology is whether we like it or not, just ubiquitous in society. So avoiding it, pretending like it doesn't exist, is going to lead to its own problems. And now I think one other way that thinking about technology like this in this way allows us to do is kind of understand a certain kind of school policy that would result. If we think of ChatGPT like calculators, the policies we're going to want to establish are going to be policies that say that there's a time and a place for the technology, just like we would say there's a time and a place to use a calculator. And I'm sure my math colleagues would back me up and say that, look, there's certain rudimentary skills that we have to teach students that you don't want to teach them on calculators 24/7 because they need those skills ingrained. But that doesn't mean you never use a calculator, right? There's a time and a place. And now a competing analogy is really to think about ChatGPT as being something like hiring a ghostwriter. And now I also think there are ways of understanding this analogy of getting certain things right. So if we think of ChatGPT as hiring a ghostwriter, then it really does illustrate this point that we want to say there's just something fundamentally wrong about passing off somebody else's, or in this case, something else's work as your own, right? So you can see why the discussion of plagiarism comes up so quickly, because we have people using the technology as a stand-in for their own work. they're passing off somebody else's or something else's work as their own work. And as educators, that just seems wrong to us. And then similarly, there also seems to be something fundamentally wrong about not completing the exercise yourself, right? So when I assign my students a project, oftentimes my goal is not the outcome of the project. I don't really care about what they turn in. What I care about is getting them to go through the exercise. And so if people are using ChatGPT to avoid or to bypass having to go through the exercise, then there seems something fundamentally wrong with that. And now you can see how, if this is how you think about the technology, you're going to end up with a very different kind of default policy from the administrative side of things, right? The school policy here seems to be like one of avoidance, right? We don't want to use the technology because of these potential harms. And now I know I'm running really short on time, so I'm just going to wrap things up here. Like others have said, it's imperative that we just understand the limitations of ChatGPT. We have to keep in mind that the goal of this technology is not truth, and that's very relevant to our jobs as educators. There are lots and lots of examples of obvious mistakes, whether they're factual mistakes or logical mistakes. And so this really brings me to the point I want to end with about school policies. We need to be very cautious about a one-size-fits-all policy. We need to be very careful about how this technology is treated from a universal standpoint. So maybe what we should do is think about having a school-wide policy about essentially the dangers of plagiarism, but then also have faculty made aware and have it be incumbent on faculty to make clear in their syllabi what the expectations are. And I wasn't going to necessarily mention this because I didn't want to be vulgar, but I think that ship has already sailed. So I'm going to just end with one last analogy, and I'm going to call it the intelligent bullshitter. So following Frankfurt, who wrote a book on bullshit with Princeton University Press, he defined bullshit just as speech that's intended to persuade without regard for truth. And I think that's maybe a good way for us to teach our students to think about what ChatGPT gives them. It's a whole lot of speech that's intended to persuade, but it's not necessarily connected to the truth. And what they have to keep in mind is that they need to be careful. And with that, I'll turn things back over to Dean Prakash. Thanks, everybody.
That was wonderful, Brett. Thank you so much. Dr. Coppenger, as always, has very thoughtful input in everything that we talk about here in the college. And by the way, he is also the coordinator of our new online program on Bachelor of Arts and Bachelor of Science in Liberal Studies. Thank you for everything that you do, Dr. Coppenger. So we now turn our attention to two other professors. So we have Dr. Garrett Ashley, who is an English professor. So let's see what he has to say. Dr. Ashley?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on the panel. I appreciate it very much. I agree with everything that's been said so far, especially to the point of this AI not being a one-size-fits-all sort of thing. I believe that every instructor, every professor is going to have a different way of approaching this, and that's a totally valid thing to think about. But the case I want to make today, at least for my part as an English teacher, we in modern languages here, we teach roughly 6 essays a semester, and these students have got to learn this stuff. Okay. The case I'm going to make is that they're not going to feel like they have agency if they over-rely on artificial intelligence. Just to start, I'll say that students doubt themselves all of the time. When they come into my classroom, they're generally panicking. They want to do well, but they do panic. and they wonder what the point is and what they're doing. I think composition students especially shouldn't feel like there necessarily needs to be some grander point at the beginning. They don't have to publish their work. They don't have to share it or over edit it for some, future reason, whatever that might be. But writing is supposed to orient them, especially in the early stages. And I think that it's something that they should try to have power over, which would be their own voice. They need to be able to figure out who they are as writers. And I think that AI, in a sense, takes that away from them. So I'm going to share ChatGPT's, I can figure out where it is. Yeah. I'm going to share this screen with you all. I went through and just entered in a few prompts that might give you an idea of how AI takes away the agency, I believe, from writers or young writers, especially. The first thing I entered in, and this is actually one of my assignments in 101, is the descriptive paper. I usually ask students to write a short descriptive essay on something about themselves. The prompt here, please write a 200-word summary of my life in Mississippi. That's what I gave to myself. I'm from Mississippi. I was maybe 12 years old in 1999. I can't remember. And it spit this out. I'm not going to read everything here. I'm just going to kind of talk around it, and I'll read some of it. But I want to give you an idea of what the voice of AI is when you're not specific enough in your prompt. In the year 1999, against the backdrop of Mississippi's rich cultural heritage and Southern charm, your life unfolded as a unique chapter in the state's history. And it goes on and on and on, and talks more about Mississippi. The music of the Delta may have resonated with you, echoing the soulful melodies that have shaped Mississippi's identity. You'll see that it's really generalized. It talks about, usually AI does the we and us thing. It speaks about a group, this general group that kind of exists in the ether. So I thought maybe I can bring this in a little bit and ask it to be a bit more specific. I think Dr. Prakash, you mentioned that you use please and thank you in your prompts. I don't with ChatGPT. Maybe I should. The previous answer I said isn't very specific to me. Add details about my time on the baseball team. I didn't play baseball. It's just an example. Add details about my time on the baseball team. And it goes on kind of with the same introduction here. But amidst the sweltering Mississippi summers, you found yourself on a journey within the realm of a baseball diamond, forging friendships, etching memories that would endure. The stadium lights illuminated your aspirations. We don't know what those aspirations are. ChatGPT does not go into them. And this section also does not have a specific moment, which is what I would want my students to do, is to talk about something that happened to them. What about you in this example? So here's where it gets a little bit scarier for me as a grader. This is still too general, I say. A specific moment related to baseball should be expounded upon. It gets there. I don't think it's framed properly, and you can all kind of look at this along with me. It was a hot June afternoon. Oh, so we're going to focus on a specific day now. That's good. The sun high in the sky, casting an intense glow over the baseball diamond. And then it actually does go into a specific moment that happened that might have changed my perspective on life, or whatever it is, like whatever the main prompt would have been for the assignment. But I still don't think that that voice is there. The way that I like to describe voice, and I'm running out of time, is that students like to have something important to them to talk about. Students like to complain. They like to brag. They like to expound upon their being. who am I in the perspective of all of this stuff that's happening in the world, and where do I fit in with all of this? So I like to give them assignments that asks them to talk about them at the beginning to try to get them into writing. The only way that we can do that, I think, is if we feel that we are expressing ourselves. So just to answer the question, do I feel that we should be using AI in the classroom? For some things, but not for drafting. So I'll go ahead and relinquish my time. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ashley. I think, as you can see, again, from a professor's point of view, someone who is a writer, someone who teaches writing and creative writing and reading here at Tuskegee University, Dr. Ashley very elegantly shared some of the pluses and minuses of using this tool. But one comment that I need to make here as a user is that with ChatGPT, you use 3.5, but 4.0 has less hallucination. And secondly, it doesn't know who you are. You didn't give enough prompts. So if you are able to provide a reference to the book that you may have written, Dr. Ashley, and so that the system has an understanding of your life and your background in much greater detail, it may be able to provide a better rounded perspective. This has been my experience. We just ask something very random for which very little information is online, it hallucinates. And the level of hallucination is much lower in 4.0. And with any system, this is being tweaked, and I see certainly it is getting better in many ways. So let's hear from another ethicist and philosopher, Dr. Samuel Taylor. Go ahead, sir.
Yes, hi everyone. I want to just start up by saying thanks to Dean Prakash for inviting me to be here today. I'm going to go through a couple slides. I might skip a few just for the sake of time, but so let me get this ready here. All right, so I'm Dr. Samuel Taylor. I teach philosophy. I often teach ethics here. So I want to just start by thinking about a few guiding ethical considerations when we think about our AI policies and the use of it in classrooms. So some ethical theories focus on questions of consequences. So we can ask questions of beneficence. So how much good can this technology do for us or for our students or for society? We have questions of non-maleficence. So what harms can it do? How can we prevent those harms? But other kind of ethical theories focus on questions of justice. Things like, does this treat people fairly and consistently? Are the goods and harms distributed in an equitable and fair manner? And does it treat people with human dignity? So these are some ethical considerations and perspectives you can take when thinking about this technology. Now, two questions you might ask are, first of all, you might ask, well, should students be allowed to use AI technology for their assignments and courses? Now, using these tools, as I mentioned, I mean, it can be both harmful and beneficial to the student and like more generally, just depending upon how that technology is used. And so because of that, whether those tools ought to be allowed, I think is likely to be context dependent. It depends on, it might vary from course to course, from assignment to assignment. As many have already said, there's probably not a one size fits all model. And so I don't really have much to say about this other than since there are benefits, we can also do harm by not talking about it and by not teaching students how to use it responsibly. But if you do allow it, then some questions arise about what kinds of considerations should we take into account when we do allow them to use these. Given the possibility of these benefits and harms, if the tools are used, we need to be aware of and try to mitigate those potential harms. So there's a lot of harms that might be done by using this technology, but two at least to be aware of are, as already mentioned, generative AI can produce false information. It can produce fabricated quotes and sources in a package that seems coherent and authoritative and convincing. And that's because unlike a calculator, it's not designed to give you truth. It's designed to mimic the kinds of answers that human beings would give. And another issue is that generative AI's responses can exhibit bias in several ways. So AI need to be trained on large sets of data. And if that data contains various biases, like gender biases, racial biases, then the patterns that the AI picks up will likely exhibit those kinds of biases in various ways as well. So I want to give you a quick example. These prompts are not my original ones. I'm just recreating ones that have been created by other scholars, other academics. But here's a screenshot of just a toy example of gender bias in ChatGPT. I ask it, the doctor yelled at the nurse because she was late. And then I ask it, well, who was late in this sentence? And it tells me the nurse was late. The she is referring to the nurse there. But when I reverse that and say the nurse yelled at the doctor because she was late, and ask it who was late, it still says the nurse was late, assuming that the she, the feminine pronoun there, refers to the nurse. And then when I say the doctor yelled at the nurse because he was late, it just gets confused. And so it seems to illustrate a kind of bias here that it assumes the she is referring to the doctor. Now, there's a potential problem with this example that you can get around, but I'm going to sort of skip that for the sake of time. A few things I want to know is this isn't meant to show you a rigorous test or give you adequate data to show the bias. It's meant just to be an illustration. It's an anecdote. And now OpenAI, as Dr. Prakash mentioned, is making advances. There's now ChatGPT 4.0. They are attempting to mitigate these risks of bias and misinformation. But there are some reasons, some technical reasons to think that those risks are always going to be present. And because of that, we as professors and students have an obligation to be aware of those risks and try to mitigate them if we use the technology. So for instance, I don't think necessarily students shouldn't use the technology, but we need to make sure that students understand they're responsible for confirming the accuracy of the information and assessing whether that material produced can reinforce harmful biases or prejudices. Oops, sorry, this goes in the other way. But this is a two-way street. The technology is new. There's not established norms for how to use this technology, as there is in cases like plagiarism, just from a source online. But other ways of using ChatGPT, I won't go through this here, like if we just use it to edit, to try to make things more concise, well, should students explicitly acknowledge that? How should they cite it if we do require them to cite it? It'd be unfair of us to hold students liable to various standards if we can't reasonably expect them to be aware of those standards, if there aren't any set conventions. And so it's our responsibility in our syllabi, in our classes, to talk with them explicitly and lay out explicitly what our expectations are. Now, this is another thing that I'm going to skip here. You might be worried about cheating, and you might have heard of AI detectors. And I do want to just give a few words of warning here. These tools are unreliable and can give false positives. And there's some research to suggest that these detectors themselves show bias against non-native speakers, giving a higher rate of false positives. And you might ask, well, what else can you do? Well, we might think of, instead of policing for this kind of cheating, trying to take preventative measures in the way that we teach, like scaffolding our papers where students do work building up to any kind of essays they build, instead of trying to police after the fact. Now, just a final thought, sometimes people worry that this can unmotivate students because they think to themselves, well, hey, look, if AI can do all this, what's the point of putting in this hard work to develop these skills? But if we reflect on these problems with them and we talk about how to evaluate these outputs and think about these issues, that requires robust critical thinking skills to do. And so we illustrate to them that these critical thinking skills are still relevant in an age of AI in order to assess how to use that technology responsibly. So that's all I wanted to talk about. I'll stop there for time there.
That's wonderful. Now that we have come to the end of the session, we just have about only a minute or two left. So if anyone has any burning questions that they want to put it in the chat, we would let Dr. Asim Ali or any of the other panel discussions take on your questions. So if you can briefly put any questions. So let me ask Dr. Ali as to, should universities have a policy on the use of generative AI, LLMs like ChatGPT? Do we need to help our faculty provide the choice of policies? I put about 4 options in the chat. So what do you think, Dr. Ali? Go ahead, Asim.
It looks like he can't
Yeah, I think,
unmute.
okay, so I think I just was able to unmute myself. So yeah, I think it's a little early for policies, simply because it's a moving target. So what we've done at Auburn is we've established guidelines and you know, we recommended steps, because the thing with policies is, especially if they're very strict, like then you challenge yourself to police something And quite frankly, like, so for example, if we take the most basic example, obviously we do not want students plagiarizing using ChatGPT or other generative AI. So if I say there's a policy that you cannot use generative AI to write your assignment, well, first of all, that's understood because plagiarism or submitting work that's not your own is already part of the general policy. But if I specifically call out generative AI, well, there's no way, and I'm one of those people who thinks there'll never be a way to know if somebody has used generative AI for writing. So now all we're doing is rewarding the very good thieves, right? In terms of people who are able to say, oh, I know how to get the generative output, as Dr. Ashley, aptly, demonstrated very, in a very brief example, right, of how subsequent engagement can yield better output. Oh, well, I happen to be a privileged student who also has subscriptions to 2 other platforms that are not well known, but that take the output from ChatGPT and actually rewrite it in my own voice because I fed it with my previous writing. In other words, trying to set up guidelines, trying to set up policies and then trying to enforce that is a fool's errand, quite frankly. What I really recommend is those constructive conversations. Students, if students are engaged in learning and they understand what the costs to them are if they don't do their work and those kinds of things, then that will hopefully yield a better output for you. And then the other option is to actually redesign the assignments that allow you to scaffold more, create more check-ins, create more work that's being done in a way that allows you to verify what's being done. And quite frankly, it's possible to design assignments where AI is not effective, it's not that useful. So those are some strategies. But then there's also all kinds of other things, right? We don't want faculty copy pasting student work into generative AI and saying things like, did you write this? Because first of all, that's completely unreliable. I unfortunately am sharing a very real example from another institution, but that's completely unreliable. And it's also, violating FERPA because we don't want to, we have no agreement with those companies that says that they can have student work. So anyway, those are some things to consider.
Yes, thank you very much. I'll just take one more extra minute to ask you a question from Dr. Etzioni on how do you determine when a false positive occurs? So when you put that into the tools like Zero GPT that can test for the ChatGPT content, and then it comes out saying, as you know, when people put the US Constitution and even King James Bible, it said it was written by AI. So these are not very reliable, is it? In terms of those Chastity, I think he's probably having a problem. Unmute me. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay. So this is what happens when we build systems and then we need to lock them down completely. So again, I think that trying to go to any extremes, if we say something like, well, AI is banned, on campus or something like that, impossible to enforce that. Secondly, there is all of them are false positives is literally the route that you have to go, because even those companies, especially probably those companies, and I don't want to call out any specific ones because I'm sure they have better lawyers, but there's companies out there that will sell you products that say, oh, we can tell if something is written by AI and we think that it's accurate up to X percentage. But then as it gets, then the next version, so the next person who asks ChatGPT to write about their summer in Mississippi, ChatGPT will do a better job of that simply because of how Dr. Ashley already engaged with it, right? So there's no way for the technology to keep up. So if the only way to know for sure if somebody has used generative AI to generate a submission is if you ask them and they say, yes, I used. And that's the only assured way to do that. And that is an approach you could take. But again, I think the real answer is how do you build that partnership with your students, but then also design your assignments to really just make the use of AI ineffective.
Exactly. Use it as a tool, use it as your assistant, and then be very transparent about it. And that way you also build I think you will be a role model for it. And with this now, I would like to conclude this session. And again, I thank all of you for wonderful presentations and then sharing your thoughts on how we can use that. I do encourage everyone to explore Dr. Ali's class that we're going to bring to Tuskegee University. You will have an opportunity to take that whole class, and so that you will have some really deep hands-on knowledge about the use of these tools that will help you move forward in a very productive but also in an ethically responsible manner ourselves. Thank you very much, and you all have a good day, rest of the day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.